Hello and hi everyone. Welcome to Confluence 2021. Thank you for joining us for your lunch hour. If you didn't have a moment to review the information that was on the PowerPoint scrolling a moment ago, there's a few things we just want to make sure we hit on. Excuse me. Just a reminder that this session is being recorded, so be sure to have your video turned off if you don't want to appear on screen during the recording. We also ask that you please remain muted while the speaker has the floor, and to use the chat box if you have any questions during this presentation. If you would like to change your meeting view, you can use the button at the top right corner of your screen to toggle between speaker and gallery view. And also be sure to stick around after the session for a networking opportunity with the other meeting attendees and for a chance to win a surprise prize. So my name is Jackie Encinas. I am a program assistant with Georgia Adopt-A-Stream, and I am happy to see everybody here today.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jackie. And my name is Bailey Kratz. I am an Adopt-A-Stream state coordinator. I'm so happy to see everyone here today. And we just kind of want to give a few other announcements before we get started. So for anyone that's unfamiliar with Georgia Adopt-A-Stream, we're happy that you've joined us today. And we just want you to know it's a citizen science program that trains volunteers to monitor water quality in all of Georgia's diverse waterways. And we have an annual conference every year called Confluence, which we're so happy that you are a part of right now today. So again, thanks for being here, and I'll hand it back to Jackie to introduce our keynote, or our speaker today, excuse me.
Right, so welcome to Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary. Our speaker today is Kimberly Roberson. She joined Gray's Reef in 2016. She is the sanctuary's research coordinator, responsible for the science conducted at the site. Kim leads Gray's Reef science team in determining research that will best inform conservation management of the sanctuary and help us better understand the ocean and the marine life that lives there. She also coordinates research activities conducted by partner organizations and other scientists that study Gray's Reef. Kim uses diving as a tool for research and also serves as the sanctuary's unit diving supervisor. In that role, she supervises the Gray's Reef dive team, and she has been a NOAA certified diver since 2005 and a NOAA dive master since 2006. She was the first female chair of the NOAA Diving Control and Safety Board and served as NOAA's National Ocean Service Diving Officer for 3 years. Prior to joining Gray's Reef's National Marine Sanctuary, Kim worked as a marine biologist with NOAA's National Centers for Coastal Ocean Sciences Biogeography Branch, where she managed Caribbean field and science research and an active 18-member dive team. Prior to joining NOAA, Kim worked with the National Park Service on St. Croix, where she managed the sea turtle research program, other threatened and endangered species protection and invasive eradication efforts, and coral reef monitoring. Kim holds a bachelor's in biology from Berry College in Rome, Georgia, and a master's in biology from Acadia University in Wolfville, Nova Scotia, where she conducted genetic research on leatherback sea turtles, exploring connectivity between nesting populations and pelagic individuals. So, Kimberly, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Jackie and Bailey, thank you very much for that introduction and for getting that mouthful of terms. so well said. I am delighted to be here today at the Confluence 2021 conference with all of you. I don't particularly enjoy the virtual types of presentation. I much prefer more engaged, interaction. So as I go through my presentation, if you do have questions along the way, please do feel free to put them in the chat box. Jackie and Bailey have agreed to help sort of look at that chat box through my presentation and then interject those questions where appropriate. And then at the end, of course, I can also stay on and we can either have chat with voice or a chat through the chat box. Again, thank you, everyone. I'm delighted to be here today to be talking with you about the National Marine Sanctuary, the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries, and about Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary here off the coast of Georgia. To put this in a little bit of context, the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries is part of the National Ocean Service. That's a fellow office with the National Weather Service. So if you're not that familiar with NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, you probably are familiar with the National Weather Service. It's where a lot of us get our forecasts, maybe check the weather before we go out paddling for the day or exploring the waterways. So we're a sister part of NOAA, the National Ocean Service, and then underneath that is the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries. And Gray's Reef sits in that Office of National Marine Sanctuaries. The sanctuary system itself, sorry about that. Let's do this. The sanctuary system itself is made up of 14 sanctuaries plus Papahanaumokuakea and Rose Atoll Marine National Monuments located out here in the Pacific. It's over 620,000 square miles of ocean within the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries, which is bigger than the entire state of Alaska. The program offers resource protection, recreation, education and outreach, maritime heritage, and my favorite part, science and exploration of our amazing ocean places. My presentation is having a little bit of difficulty here. If we zoom into the Atlantic coast of the east coast of the US, and then zoom in further to what's called the South Atlantic Bight, you can see the coast of Georgia, which I'm sure several of you are very familiar with. And just
Really, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're not seeing your presentation.
Let's see.
There we go.
I'm very glad you interrupted. Thank you, Jackie. I'll just back up for a moment so everyone can get a visual of what I was just talking about with the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries and our system throughout the United States and coastal waters. Here you can see the map that has the 14 national marine sanctuaries and the 2 marine national monuments out in the Pacific. If we zoom into the East Coast and the South Atlantic Bight, you can see the coastal islands of Georgia and Sapelo Island. Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary is located 19 miles due east of Sapelo Island, out in the Atlantic Ocean. Gray's Reef was the 4th national marine sanctuary in the United States. It was designated in 1981 by President Jimmy Carter. It's a 22 square mile area. That's about 14,000 acres. And it's open to boating, fishing, and diving. Gray's Reef is a multi-use area. And as I mentioned, it's open for fishing, diving, and boating, as long as regulations such as no anchoring and no spearfishing are followed. The southern 1/3 of the Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary was designated as a research area in 2011. And this area is closed to those human activities so that scientists can have an area to study the ocean in the absence of human impacts. In the 1960s, Sam Gray was a researcher who was working at the University of Georgia Marine Institute on Sapelo Island, and he was very interested in the seafloor organisms that were being incidentally caught by local fishermen in hotspots called the Sapelo live bottom at the time. Lots of seafloor invertebrates were coming up, and he was more and more curious about that. Gray's Reef itself is an average depth of 65 feet and consists of this live hard bottom, this Sapelo live hard bottom, with ledges and nooks and crannies, as well as flat and rippled sand throughout the sanctuary. The live hard bottom is very different from a coral reef. Instead of being a reef that's grown by little tiny coral polyps, the reef structure at Gray's Reef is a sediment-like sandstone that allows corals and sponges and invertebrates to attach to it. And the name Gray's Reef was proposed for the live bottom habitat to commemorate Sam Gray's valuable contributions to this sanctuary designation. Gray's Reef is home to over 900 invertebrate species like sea stars, shrimp, octopus, jellyfish, soft corals, and about 200 species of fish, including sharks, snappers, groupers, jacks, blennies, angelfish, tomtates, cubby ewes that you can see here in the photograph. The great biodiversity of this place is due to the dynamic location of Gray's Reef. So Gray's Reef is not only influenced by the warm Gulf Stream waters coming up along the Gulf of Mexico and Florida, but it's also influenced by the cold, nutrient-rich waters coming down from the north by way of the Labrador Current. So there's certainly north and south influence, but there's also east-west influence. Certainly you all here are familiar with the tides of the Georgia coast. And then the watersheds as well along the coast of Georgia influence Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary. The Savannah River, the Ogeechee, the Altamaha, the Satilla, and the St. Mary's River basins all influence Gray's Reef. I often call it a mixing bowl or a washboard of a space when we're out there diving and the seas are a little bit rough. We do get the north and south currents, and then we're also daily influenced by the tides and the river runoff. In 2014, there was a study conducted by some of Gray's Reef research partners from Georgia Southern University, Drs. Risa Cohen and Danny Gleason, released dye and drifters in the Altamaha River. And it discovered that it took about 8 days for the drifters to reach Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary from that river. And it took a few days for the dye to reach Gray's Reef. So there certainly is connection between what we do onshore and what occurs offshore 20 miles at Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary. That connectivity, the tightness of that connectivity was very apparent in May when they ran that experiment. They also repeated the experiment in September and found something very different, and that the drifters actually stayed near the Georgia coast. And you can see that in the, if you can see my cursor in the lower left quad of the 4 photographs, in May of 2014, the drifters headed in an easterly direction and then reached Gray's Reef in a matter of a couple of days, whereas in September the drifters actually stayed up in the river basin. There are several areas of scientific research where we focus at Gray's Reef, and a lot of this work includes fish and turtle surveys, habitat and invertebrate surveys, plant identification, and monitoring of invasive species like the invasive Pacific lionfish. We utilize our own small boats at the sanctuary, as well as the NOAA ship Nancy Foster, So off of our 2 small platforms, we take daily trips out to Gray's Reef. We have a 36-foot research vessel named the Sam Gray and a 40-foot research vessel catamaran named the RV Joe Ferguson. And both of these allow us to visit the sanctuary on a daily basis. It takes about 2 hours for our commute. And then we do our research, often our diving research, and then we travel back another hour and a half or so to get back to land. A lot of benefits of these small research vessels are that it's easy access for us. We can go out on any given day when the weather allows us to conduct our local research and take our research partners with us. But during 2 weeks during the summer, we're often lucky to get the Nancy Foster, one of the NOAA ships, to come down and spend 2 weeks' time in Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary, allowing us to save our commute time to sleep and dive out there and really be productive. I'd like to talk with you about what it's like to experience life on a research vessel out at Gray's Reef and conducting the research. So we leave our town of Savannah and drive up to the home port of Charleston, which is where the Nancy Foster is docked. And then we all hop on board and bring the Nancy Foster back down to Gray's Reef. And while we're on that platform, we conduct all sorts of safety drills and skills, and we become familiar with the ship itself. The reason that we need to become familiar with the ship is because it's 187 feet long. That's the length of 5 school buses, and it's 5 stories tall. So there's a lot going on this ship. The ship has lots of space for our scuba diving equipment, for our technical equipment as well, lots of mapping equipment and water sampling equipment, and allows us really to be efficient with our research. The ship itself holds 12 researchers, and it takes a crew of 22 people. So it's quite an intensive period of research that we can utilize off of this large platform. One of the skills, one of the capabilities that we have on the NOAA ship, Nancy Foster, is fine scale habitat mapping. And what we do here is allow the ship to send down, sorry about this, a couple of different feeds are not working for me here, so please bear with me. The ship emits sound waves that reach the bottom of Gray's Reef and then bounce back at different lengths. And we basically mow the lawn of the sanctuary with the ship, going back and forth over the sanctuary, sending down these waves and bouncing them back. And then we're able to interpret those data to relate the depths of the sanctuary. So we really get basically a roadmap of the sanctuary, looking at the heights and the depths and the nooks and crannies of the bottom of the seafloor. So the warmer colors are shallower. So here you can see the reds and the yellows, those are shallower areas, and the greens and blues are deeper areas. So that data collection occurs usually at night, and then we utilize the daytime hours to conduct diving operations. And so early in the morning, about 6 o'clock, folks are up and about, and they're gathering all of their equipment and getting it into the small boats, and then eating breakfast, and then heading out to the small boats where we're ready to launch off of the back deck of the Nancy Foster. This video may be a little bit choppy, but I think you'll get the idea of what it takes to get these 3 small boats into the water to conduct our research. Was everyone able to see that video okay? Okay, thank you very much. So some of those 22 people who allow the 12 scientists to do their job include cooks who keep us well fed and happy in the galley, crane operators to be able to put the small vessels over the side, safety officers, ship's captain and crew to drive the vessel, etc. Once the scientists are in the water, we head to our dive site and get ready to dive. Sometimes we're graced by beautiful marine mammals like these dolphins here. We're able to see and hear them from the surface and then get a little bit of video underwater of them. When we get on site, we drop a surface marker buoy so we can mark the dive site where we'll be diving. And then we check our gear. Certainly have a large focus, excuse me, on safety when we're doing all of these dive operations. Then after we've checked our gear and we're ready to go, we signal to the coxswain of the small vessel, the captain of the small vessel, and then he lets us know that we're safe to dive, dive, dive. We roll off the back of the small vessel and enter the water with all of our scientific equipment, cameras, GoPros strapped to our chests, sometimes clipboards, measuring tapes. And we're ready to begin our descent to the seafloor. We're going down here to about 65 feet of water over our heads. My colleague Allison likes to have the Star Wars theme in her head as we're descending. And then on the bottom, you can see sometimes we have limited visibility. It's certainly due to the nutrient-rich waters sourced from the multiple rivers along the Georgia coast, and then that north-south influence as well from the currents. And here in the picture, you can see a plastic PVC frame with lots of little tiny squares in it. This tool is called a quadrat. It helps scientists count different organisms and estimate the abundance of those organisms. There are lots and lots of sponges, some algae in this picture. Here's a hard coral, lots of sponges, soft corals, and there's a diver and a second diver in the background there. Over the course of the 2 weeks, these invertebrate specialists sampled 30 sites and recorded the information in 359 quadrats. So, and then in this photo, you can see a habitat diver, Allison, measuring the heights of different corals and different soft coral structures, as well as measuring the heights of and the undercuts of the ledges. The ledges at Grays Reef National Marine Sanctuary can be anywhere from a couple of centimeters tall to several feet tall, and actually go back several meters as well, and provide some amazing habitat for some of the larger fishes, like these snappers that you see here, grunts, as well as sea turtles and sharks. After we finish our fish counting and our habitat documenting and photographing, then it's time for the divers to come to the surface and signal to the small boat that we're ready to be picked up. And after those 2 morning dives, we have certainly worked up an appetite, and it's time to head back to the vessel for lunch. And we also utilize this lunchtime dining in the galley to also refresh our scuba tanks and refill them, and to get our data sheets for the afternoon's dives as well. And then we head back out in the afternoon and conduct 3 more dives at different sites throughout the sanctuary. In the evening, when we resurface, we spend a little bit of time here on what's called Steel Beach. It's a good outdoor space for us to gather and chat about the day and prepare for the next day. We've also seen some pretty spectacular sunsets from out at Grays Reef. There's minimal light pollution out there, and it really is a beautiful time. But we don't typically wind down here. We keep going and get ready for some more activities like data entering and quality control, etc. processing our samples, making sure we catalog everything properly. And it really does take a lot of teamwork to make the dream work. That's one of the things that we enjoy saying. I have put a question in here just to ask you. It's not a poll, so you don't have to respond to it, but just food for thought. I'm curious for you to think about what you would be most excited about living on board a research vessel, whether it's exploring the ship, looking at the beautiful, clear, starry nights, all you can eat food, including ice cream until it runs out, or diving at Gray's Reef. So as you think about that, I'm going to move into some of the science that we conduct not aboard the newest ship, Nancy Foster. So Gray's Reef also conducts some what we call in-house research, and a large portion of our research portfolio has to do with understanding ocean noise at Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary. The project that we work on is actually in collaboration with several of the other sanctuaries throughout the system. So we're getting sound profiles from 7 of the units throughout the sanctuary system, and beginning to understand the ocean soundscape in these different locations. On the East Coast, Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, Gray's Reef, and Stellwagen Bank are participating in the Ocean Soundscapes Project. And what exactly is the Ocean Soundscapes Project? Well, it's understanding what noises are in the ocean, whether they are biotic or abiotic, and learning how animals may respond to the different types of noises within the sanctuary. This is, again, just another question I wanted to put to you. It's not a poll, so you don't have to type anything into the chat box, but just for consideration, what are some sources of human-made or anthropogenic sounds in the ocean? What kind of noises do you think fish might be hearing other than their fish buddies talking to them and warning them about different things? What other kinds of noises do you think we as humans are making that are producing sounds in the ocean environment? Over the past century, human activities such as energy exploration, recreational boating, and shipping have increased all along our coasts, offshore and in the deep ocean environments. And so noises from these activities travel long distances underwater, and they lead to increases and changes in ocean noise levels, which also can influence the habitats and behaviors of the animals that utilize the ocean. So it's news to a lot of people that sound underwater can travel, but I often like to relate this to when a person goes for a walk in the woods, or with you all when you go for a paddle. You know, you're out in the natural environment. What sorts of noises do you hear? You might hear the flush of wings from a bird in the marsh. You might hear a paddle stroking through the water. If we're going for a walk in the woods, we can hear the crunching of the leaves underneath our feet. The same types of things happen when we're underwater as well. And it actually can be quite noisy under there. This is a sound I'd like to play for you. And please indicate to me if you can hear the sound. I'll turn up my speaker pretty loudly. This is a vessel, one vessel underwater, approaching and then leaving a hydrophone, an underwater microphone. Were you all able to hear that? Yes, okay. I'm getting some, okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, I checked the chat box. Sorry about that. It took me a few minutes to check it, but it seems like you all were able to hear it. That's great, because I do also have some other sounds throughout my presentation that I'd love to introduce you to. So sound through water travels like waves, and it does travel very far. And then the frequency with which sound travels through the waves can tell us a lot about who's present throughout the soundscape. whether it's high frequencies or low frequencies. And the way that we can figure this out is by placing equipment on the seafloor. This is a hydrophone, which is a fancy word for an underwater microphone, a microphone in the water, hydrophone, that allows us to record the sounds, all of the sounds going on in the water. At Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary, our sanctuary, certainly compared to the other 2 sanctuaries that are participating in this project on the East Coast, to Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary and Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, Gray's Reef has more natural noise that's being produced. If you think about Stellwagen Bank and where it's located geographically, it certainly has a lot of shipping traffic up in the Northeast. And then the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary has a lot of small boat noise as well. And so within Gray's Reef, we're finding that we have quite a natural symphony, if you will, of noise. So that's probably one of my favorite sound clips. The croaking oyster toadfish was heard there, making himself known, as well as lots of other noises. And I'll take you through a couple of these and parse them out for you. What you're looking at on the screen is a picture of an oyster toadfish with a shell right in front of it. These fish remind me of sort of grumpy old men, and then they make that funny barking noise as well. And then the lower left here is a visual depiction of the noise that we're hearing. So we can use both our eyes and our ears to find out what some of this noise is, and then identify the creatures who are making it. Another voice that is represented a lot at Gray's Reef is actually this little creature here, a couple of centimeters long, snapping shrimp. And this is what they sound like, kind of like they're playing the maracas out there. So that's just thousands and thousands of snapping shrimp doing their little snapping shrimp thing. Another sound I'll play for you is this school of what we think are cubby-ewe. And when the cubby-ewe school together and then change direction, there is some vocalization and some noise that's produced. To me, that kind of sounds like we gave a bunch of 3-year-olds some little drums or some percussion instruments, and they all kind of banged on it for a little while. It's a little more subtle than the other noises. But to me, it sounds like bubbles sort of popping underwater. And then there's this other sound produced by a black sea bass. We kind of sometimes refer to the black sea bass as little puppy dogs, or in this case, lazy sound producers. So there are just a few little noises here that we've picked out from the black sea bass for you to hear. Just a few single little drum beats there. So those were some of the sounds from Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary. And if you look at this map and the different East Coast sanctuaries that are participating in this project, again, you get the idea that Stellwagen Bank will probably have a very different composition of sounds and noises and human-produced noises, as well as, as well as natural noises being produced, a lot of marine mammals, perhaps. And then in Florida Keys, we'll get even more of the tropical fish making their noises, as well as really, small boat traffic zooming back and forth as folks utilize that space for a lot of scuba diving and snorkeling recreation as well. So not only do we use sound to tell us about who's in the environment, but we also utilize some other technology with tracking animal movement. So not only do we want to know at any given time who's making noises in the environment, but also where they are and then how they're moving. Are they moving in and out of the space? Are they moving north and south? Are they moving east and west? Are they just staying put? So we have a project that we conduct at Gray's Reef for tracking animal movement. And the way that we do that is we also put pieces of equipment into the ocean called acoustic receivers. And these acoustic receivers hang a few feet off the bottom of the ocean floor and receive information from animals who have transmitters in them. So this fish over here, the black sea bass, has a transmitter that's been put inside it, and it then emits a sound that the receiver can hear. We can't hear the sound, but it is picked up by this acoustic receiver. And then this information, this technology allows us to know that black sea bass number 1 was at acoustic receiver station number 1 at this time and date. And we can follow this fish throughout the space. And then in addition to our stationary receivers that we have at Gray's Reef, we also work with Dr. Catherine Edwards at Skidaway Institute of Marine, Skidaway Institute of Oceanography, and her amazing gliders that she puts through the water. And these gliders sail through the water column up and down, and then can move throughout space. And then we can attach hydrophones that you see here with the little microphone listening tip, as well as acoustic receivers. And then we can also have a mobile platform that then follows fish movement throughout the space. To have all of this information track these animals, we actually have to tag the animals first. And to tag them, we have to catch them. A lot of people enjoy this part of the project, getting to fish for black sea bass. We handle them very, very gingerly and gently, and then have them on board for just a little while we pump water over their gills and then insert the transmitter into their belly cavity, and then give them a couple of sutures, make sure they've recovered quite well, and then we dive them down to the seafloor and release them. And then we're ready to start gathering information about their movements and tracking them throughout the space. Gray's Reef has been doing some of this work for over 10 years, and we've collaborated with a lot of researchers up and down the East Coast in a network called the FACT Network. And so when people tag animals, say in Florida or up in Nova Scotia, and they want to know where those animals travel, those animals are picked up on receivers throughout the entire network of researchers along the eastern seaboard of the US and into Canada and into the Caribbean. And then we all have data sharing agreements, and we tell where everyone's animals have been going up and down and east and west and north and south. And at Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary, for these data that we have been collecting over 10 years, looking at the animals that move through the space of Gray's Reef, we've had over 160 animals that were tagged by researchers not working at Gray's Reef, 18 different types of animals that were detected, including 11 species of sharks, and then some endangered species as well. Atlantic sturgeon and loggerhead sea turtles, the threatened loggerhead sea turtle, have been using the space at Gray's. So research at Gray's Reef, and really scientific research in general, is really a collaborative effort. It involves not just marine biologists and people who can put the equipment out and understand the data, but it also involves engineers who make this equipment available to us that can withstand being in salt water for months at a time. Certainly involves social sciences, policymakers, the general community, volunteers, fishers, divers, boaters. And so it really is a collaborative effort that we do not only with lots of different types of people within the community, but also with emerging technologies, and all keeping in mind that this work is for the, the conservation and wise use of our marine resources. So just like with the Adopt a Stream and Adopt a Wetland programs, Gray's Reef also does have a volunteer program. So a couple of ways that we encourage folks to become involved or stay involved is to always, be curious and ask questions about the places that you are experiencing. Continue to pursue your passions. Volunteer for those things that are close to you and the passions that you do have. Enjoy and learn about these amazing resources. Paddle, explore, and really be an advocate for responsible recreation in these amazing places that we have. And with that, I'll wrap up. And I think there's plenty of time for questions. I put this slide in here to remind me to let you all know that my amazing colleague, Allison Sauce, is responsible for much of this creative content that you saw here today. So just a little shout out to her for putting most of the slide presentation together. And thank you all for attending today.
Yes, thank you, Kimberly, so much. That was an excellent presentation. I know probably the most exciting part for me, if I was to be on a research vessel, would be the diving. Of course, I don't know how to scuba dive, but I think that would just be pretty cool. That's pretty amazing that all the work that you guys do and all the research, definitely a lot of projects you all work on. So it's very interesting. Does anybody have any questions? You can put them in the chat. We have a question from Gretchen. She asked, how often do you hear whales?
That is an excellent question. We have, I'll call it oodles and oodles of sound files, actually, to go through. And as we go through them, you might imagine that it's a pretty time-intensive process. And it does take, it can be done in a lot of different ways. We can have untrained ears listening and untrained eyes watching the audiogram as it goes through, and then just interesting sounds flagged. Then for other researchers who are more adept at identifying sounds to go through those interesting sounds to then identify them to certain types of animals. We are working our way through all of that information. We do know that there has been, I think, one whale sound positively identified so far at Gray's Reef on our Gray's Reef sound files. We're hopeful that we will hear more, and we do expect to hear more. We have also heard dolphins. We've identified, we collectively, not just me, our team of researchers working on identifying these sounds has also identified dolphins, and then a couple of those other sound files that we played for you as well. We do have one interesting sound that happened in October, oddly enough, a couple of years ago, and we haven't been able to identify what it is, and it honestly sounds like, if you were to think back to, cartoon depictions of ghost noises, like maybe on Scooby-Doo or something like that, where there's like a woo sound, we actually have a sound underwater that sounds very similar to that, and we have no idea. It's a one-off. It's just one little sound that we've heard, and we have no idea what that source might be.
Wow. That's really cool. I know, I can imagine the Scooby-Doo cartoon, and I know exactly what sound you're talking about. So that'd be pretty cool if they're able to identify what that is. So because I was wondering that too, these sound files that you're capturing, I mean, it's just a collage of different sounds over a period of time. So you have to just listen to one track and then be able to identify specific unique sounds in that track. I'm just blown away by that. That seems like a lot of long work to be able to like have that ear to identify, that's pretty neat.
One of the things that I really enjoy about science and biology is the creativity that a lot of different individuals bring to science. I am not, a very well-versed musician, but people who work in sound can really contribute to projects, like this, figuring out what the soundscapes of an oceanscape sounds like. So it really does take all types of people with all types of skill sets to come together and creatively and constructively answer these questions that we have. The Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary Foundation is a organization that supports Gray's Reef and works in close collaboration with us. Jody Patterson is the president's the wrong word. She heads up the Gray's Reef Foundation, and they are putting out a sanctuary soundscape volunteer project where people can listen to these data files and then flag the interesting sounds and note the times and the dates. And then that information that this volunteer core of people gleans out of these hours and hours and hours of information can then be passed on to researchers for further identification and investigation. And so if that's something that interests folks, they can certainly reach out to me or to our research volunteer coordinator, Ben Pruitt, who might actually be on the video today, to get in touch with Jody Patterson and the Gray's Reef Foundation, or they can simply Google Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary Foundation and find out about that project.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing that with us. We have a few questions that showed up in the chat. So let me see.
Yeah, we have one from Chris Kodani. He is an avid fisherman. He wants to know, he catches black sea bass all the time in the intercoastal waterway, and he says, what's the farthest that one has moved? Do you know?
Oh, good question. Thank you for that one, Chris. Most of the black sea bass at Gray's Reef that we currently have tagged are actually fairly sedentary. They're kind of we call them lazy sound producers. They might actually be kind of lazy fish too. I don't know that they swim all that far. They're pretty local. They have jumped from one or two of our receivers throughout the space of Gray's Reef back and forth. We have yet to fully analyze those data. We're actually looking to tag several more black sea bass to get a bigger sample size. We currently have 6 individuals tagged out there. We're looking to tag several more to increase our sample size. But right now, some of those fish have moved between a couple of the different acoustic receivers, and those are scattered throughout the 22 square miles of the space of Gray's Reef.
Neat. Ganesh wants to know, are visitors allowed at the sanctuary?
Yes, they are absolutely allowed at the National Marine Sanctuary. One of the parallels that people often draw between the National Marine Sanctuary units that are all along the coastal waters of the US and a little bit further offshore, and to things that you might be more familiar with are like units within the National Park Service, right? So folks can hike and walk through and experience national parks. The Office of National Marine Sanctuaries also encourages folks to visit your national marine sanctuaries, right? Dive, take pride, really figure it, visit them, enjoy them. Each of these units does have regulations to follow, and those regulations are put in place so we can all work together collaboratively to protect these great ocean places. So like the Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary, yes, get out there, check it out. Go boating, go diving. We don't allow spearfishing throughout the sanctuary, and we only allow certain types of fishing. So please do check our website to make sure that you're educated on what you can and can't do while you're out there. The southern 1/3 of the sanctuary that I mentioned earlier is closed to diving and fishing. Vessels can transit through that space. It's part of the ocean, but they cannot stop or go fishing or go diving there.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. We have a few more. Sorry, they might not be in order, everyone. Sorry, I'm just grabbing a couple that are right here that I can see. Bill wants to know, he says, corals are being damaged by temperature changes and pollution around the world. And are you seeing any such impacts at Gray's Reef?
Thank you for that succinct yet very complex question. Yes, I think that changing temperatures throughout the ocean is something that is occurring. It's been documented. It affects all of us. It affects all of the creatures in the ocean in different ways. We do have a long-standing partnership with a researcher at the University of Georgia who does a lot of work on ocean acidification. And the reason that I'm talking about ocean acidification in relationship to climate change is because the temperatures in the ocean affect the acidity or how basic the ocean water is. And we do know that there are changes going on at Gray's Reef, even 20 miles offshore in 65 feet of water. We're seeing some changes over time and trends. Some of those changes that may affect organisms at Gray's Reef include shell thinning. So as the temperatures in the ocean change and that acidity in the oceans change, organisms may then need to put more energy into building their shells and keeping their shells healthy, which then takes energy away from other things like looking for mates or providing food for yourself to be healthy enough to reproduce. So we suspect that there will be effects of ocean acidification in relation to changing climates for years to come.
Thank you for sharing that with us. We have another question from Jack, and I believe this goes back to the drift study that you mentioned towards the beginning. And he wants to know why the seasonal variation in the drift rates. So I think this goes to in September, they noticed it was staying closer to the coast. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm trying to draw up that poster right now. I was not part of that study, which is why I was trying to draw up the poster. Let's see if I can get all the way back there. So the study was done by Drs. Risa Cohen and Danny Gleason from Georgia Southern University. And again, it was in the 2014 timeframe. It's going to take me a while to get back there. And I've actually asked them about it several times, and they actually say, if we were to do that study again now with the advances in technology and the uses and the tools that we've discussed, we all, as scientists and others in the world have discovered, we probably would use different tools, right? So at the time, this seemed pretty spot on to do this, but we now have lots of other tools in our toolboxes to figure out how things are connected and what influences what. We have satellite imagery, we have all sorts of ocean going drifters now that can tell us much more about currents and connectivity between places on land and offshore. So the one study that was done here, if you can see the slide, I know it's a little bit small, but the one study that was done here had several different drifters that were put in, and they were actually made by students and teachers at schools. And then those students and teachers were all deployed at the same time to release their drifters. So there was a lot of coordination and collaboration with local school kids to do this, which I thought was really, really a great way to go about doing a study. And then the professors themselves released the dye at the same time off of the vessels. And the seasonal variation has to do, and I won't speak too detailed about this. This is not my wheelhouse, if you will, but the seasonal variation has to do with the ocean currents themselves and then the seasonality of tides and currents. So in May, we've got a more sort of offshore, southeasterly moving kind of overall current direction. And then in September, the time that they did the study, there was a more onshore movement of water. And if you're more interested in that, I can talk with you offline about it, and I can also provide you some more resources to check into that will speak more eloquently to the just seasonal variation in our coasts.
Thank you for explaining that. I know that's not yours, but I think you did a great job explaining that. Definitely elucidated some information for us, so thanks. We do have a couple more left in here, and Ann Ledbetter wants to know, are you doing any projects with right whales?
We are currently not actively doing any research with right whales. Anytime we're on the water, we keep an eye out for everything, for the highly endangered North Atlantic right whale, any loggerhead or other sea turtles that we may see surface while we're out there, or even swim in the water when we're underwater. The hydrophones, one of the great things about utilizing advances in technology to do science research, the hydrophones get to stay out of Gray's Reef underwater 24 hours, 7 days a week. Whereas I, as a scuba diver, without having grown gills yet, have to come up every once in a while and refill my tank and then go back out there. So the hydrophones get to record information all the time, as well as long as they function and their batteries hold and their capacity for recording data holds. So we get to have a window without humans involved to listen and sometimes to see if we deploy video equipment underwater as well. So we are hopeful that we can hear North Atlantic right whale noise production on our hydrophones at Gray's Reef. But as of yet, I think so far we've only identified one whale noise. So, and other than that research, we are not actively conducting research right now on right whales. There are several other people up and down the Atlantic coast who are. Yeah.
Thanks, Kimberly. I have another question, just a personal question. For the black sea bass, when you're tracking them and you have to catch them to tag them, how are you applying the tags? Is it an adhesive? Is it something that goes inside the fish? I'm not sure. How do you go about that?
Very good question. We capture the black sea bass with the hook and line. So we're out there fishing with a rod and reel, and then we reel them up. And I'll get to my slide in a minute. For some reason, when I click on it on my screen, I can't immediately project it over here. So I'm having to click through all of my slides to get to where I want to go. It'll take me just a minute, but I do have a slide that shows a few photographs of that process. And I'll talk to you about it as well. So the fish need to have a transmitter put inside them in the gut cavity. And to do that, we make a small incision in the underbelly of the fish and slide the small transmitter into the fish. These transmitters are sized to relate to the size of the fish for which we're targeting. So we're not going to, the transmitters come in all sorts of different sizes. They come in little tiny sizes and then really big sizes. And ours is about, a smallish size. Ordered so that it fits properly to the type of fish that we're targeting to catch. We take the fish after we catch it and put it into a sling. You can see here in this picture in the middle of the screen with the person's two hands. And then we gently allow water to go over the gills of the fish while it's upside down. And while it's upside down and the belly is exposed, we make a small incision in the belly cavity and then put in this small transmitter and then put a couple of sutures on the fish, and then we hold the fish for a while longer on the boat within holding tanks that have seawater flushing through them. So there's plenty of oxygen, plenty of regulation of the water temperature, and make sure that those fish are recovering well. And then we put them in nets with a scuba diver. This is a picture of me on the bottom releasing, I think, our first 2 fish that we tagged, if I'm not mistaken. And releasing them back down on the reef where they were caught and where they're familiar with that habitat, so they can resume what they were doing before we caught them and put the transmitter in their bellies.
Thanks for answering that. Looks like we have one more question. Sorry if I skipped over that in the chat. Let's see, where is it?
Yeah, I think Trish just wanted to know how many white sharks you have encountered at Gray's Reef.
Out of those 11 species of sharks, I do think that white sharks were some of the ones that we have encountered. We don't often see sharks while we're underwater, so that's what's so great, but also can be a little bit alarming about this technology that we use. So we're out there in a non-COVID year quite frequently, diving underwater and doing our research. And so there have been times where I've been out there and you know, the hairs on the back of my neck, you know, kind of stand up, and I'm like, why? What's that feeling? And I kind of look around. I have only ever seen a couple of species of sharks while I've been underwater, but I do know that there was a white shark that was picked up on one of our receivers on a day where I was conducting dive operations. So I do know that a white shark and I were in proximity to one another on a day out at Gray's Reef. But we don't typically see them. You know, sharks are made for that environment. I'm a human who breathes there and only jumps in that environment as a visitor. And so I know that they can detect me far before I see them. And I don't think that they're all that interested in what we're doing. So I have not visually seen white sharks underwater. I've seen some, let's see, sandbar sharks, some nurse sharks, a couple of other species, not that many. And certainly I have not seen a white shark while I've been in the water, but I do know that on the same day, we were both out there.
Thank you for that, Kimberly. And if there's no more questions, then that concludes this session. Thank you so much, Kimberly.